let's use the chat to just share a few things that we're excited about for the fall term or for fall in general. Would love to hear some ideas from you all, things that you have top of mind, something that's exciting. And we're going to use that chat quite a bit today. So appreciate you sharing, and you can share it with everybody or just the host and panelists.
Give you a minute to think about that. Turn to students in physical environment.
New class in sociology. That's great. There's asynchronous online and course in music. Oh, great.
Yeah, there's still a lot of firsts this year. Yes. I think 2020 was the first for online, and now it's hybrid or online. So it's exciting.
And continuing online education, meeting new students. Meeting new students was always probably one of the most exciting things for me. New innovative tools for online learning.
Glad you're here, Charles. Maybe.
Student-centered learning, love it.
Hopefully.
Oh, thank you all for sharing. This is great. Wonderful. I love all of these great things that you're excited about for the fall. This is awesome. Taking a leap in teacher presence. Awesome. Okay.
Cool.
Fantastic, everyone. Thank you. As I said, we're going to use the chat quite a bit. And so I appreciate you helping us create an engaging environment for our webinar today. We'll go through some introductions and get things rolling. So excited to be with you all today. I'll get started and then we can go down the group. And I do want to point out that we have our contact information at the end. Would love to hear from you, and please reach out. I'm Natalie Murray. I have just joined the Yellowdig team supporting learning design and focused on student success outcomes. I've been in higher education since I fell in love with teaching when I was in grad school, and just absolutely love the adult learning environment and all the amazing ways in which we can support each other in our learning journey. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm currently in a PhD program in human development. So I'm steeped in human development, but I've been in the higher education industry in a number of different roles, most recently at two large institutions, one at University of Texas, and then most recently at Western Governors University as the Vice President of Student Experience, and focused across many service lines, as well as ensuring that our faculty were well supported. And I'm thrilled to be joined by my incredible colleagues here and another Natalie. I appreciate your time. So continue with the intros and we'll get started.
I guess that's me next in order, and to separate the two Natalies who need to be kept, arm's distance or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'm Bob Ertischek. I'm Yellowdig's Senior Academic Liaison. And I come to Yellowdig with, oddly enough, a higher education background. In fact, I started off with a law career, but around the turn of the century, a little before the turn of the century, I started transitioning to teaching. And right after the turn of the century, I started working as an instructional technologist, faculty developer, helping instructors even back then put elements of their course online, whether that was distance courses or even then blended face-to-face courses. We were starting to experiment with all that kind of stuff. And while I loved the promise of online learning, I found that the tools and the pedagogy didn't really support the kinds of engagement in learning communities that I had been looking for. So I moved on and I went on to teach political science for over a decade in my own face-to-face courses. I stayed away from LMS tools because of what I just said, and I tried all kinds of wacky experiments, from using AOL Instant Messenger to blogs to, I never used MySpace, I don't think, but lots of other things. And they came with their own set of problems. And really what I was just trying to do was trying to get beyond the 50 minutes 3 times a week and learn more from my students and give them more opportunities to grow. I also ran a professional development community called Profology for a while, which was basically a learning community for faculty members. And now I work at Yellowdig to support all of our instructors in helping them with best practices, getting the most out of the platform, brainstorming ideas to use Yellowdig, and otherwise do whatever I can to help. And on to the next Natalie.
So exciting. I love like learning and hearing everyone every time. My name's Natalie. I have a background in education. I started my journey transferring from Sacramento Community College to UC Davis, where I actually earned my human development major degree. So I'm really excited to hear. We got to chat more about that. I did some work with Carol Dweck's research in growth mindset at UC Davis, and I found that this is very applicable. I have to do this in the classroom. So I spent a lot of time in surrounding cities up in Davis, just putting that research into practice into classrooms. Decided to move to Berkeley, another college town, and I received my Master's of Education in University of Pacific. And I taught for 2 years. I have a background in teaching middle school science, so that was really fun. Then 2020 in March happened, and I really actually found myself gravitating to online tech and how it can be interactive and fun and really create that social presence. But as Natalie Murray said, I consider myself a lifelong learner. So I pivoted from classroom-based education to higher education with Yellowdig and technology. So I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Natalie.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Bob, I've used so many tools as well for the great course engagement, and even like a very sad run with Twitter and hashtags.
Yeah, did that too. Forgot about that one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy we can all be together, and so happy you're all joining us today. We wanted to start with just thinking about why this topic is so exciting. We were pretty excited internally, and just love the response from you all for joining. And I know everybody's super busy. This is a busy time of year, so appreciate the time that you're taking to be with us today and to contribute with this in this presentation and discussion. We're going to approach this pretty authentically and casually, and we have some great ideas and some learnings that we're already incorporating in. And then I'm especially interested for you all who are attending and participating today, or might be watching the recording, about what topics are really top of mind for you, and how we can bring in more research and case studies and explorations, and even Q&A forums to our monthly webinar series. So feel free, if you have ideas, to put them in the chat, or again, send us follow-up later. But there's obviously a lot of interest and excitement around these topics, and want to make sure that we're supporting everyone in this exploration. But I wanted to share why I am personally very excited about this topic. And it has to do with like 3 primary things. And being the Gen Xer that I am, I of course had to write them down, because anything that's important, I write it down. But the first thing is really, if I'm thinking about the 2 roles in the learning experience, the students and the faculty member are just the primary ones. They're so impactful to each other, and caring deeply about each one's experience is so valuable in understanding the total student experience and the faculty experience. I'm also incredibly excited about how, with technology and data, and even just how we've been disrupted in our working lives the past 18 months, is that the role of faculty is evolving and expanding. And there's so many new ways that we can be present for one another, and new ways of engaging with one another. And I think that that's a really interesting space to see how we're kind of in this transition moment of leveraging tools, and also leveraging new mindsets or approaches to our learning experience. Is just really exciting to me. And then the third piece that we know is so important is that faculty and faculty presence has a clear impact on student outcomes. And I know that we're all very focused on supporting students to success. We want to ensure that they're successful. We want to give them their best shot, and then also ensure that they're really deeply learning those learning objectives, and gaining clear skills and competencies for their future work. So knowing the importance of faculty and the value of faculty presence in the outcomes of students really excites me for this topic. Natalie, I wonder what's exciting for you for this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime instructors or teachers can use data-driven decision making to move forward and really leverage the support of your students in their learning, I think that's, was the focus of my grad school when I learned teaching and Masters of Ed. So yeah, I think the other thing too for me is our presence and our behaviors influence those around us. And so for me, it's not so much like what am I going to put together and just, dump to my students. It's how are we going to interact around what I've designed? What could I learn from you? And working with 12-year-olds for some time, you really learn a lot about yourself and kind of just how you show up and what you bring. So I think on an online space, you can definitely learn a lot in a different mode. So very exciting. Bob, how about you?
So it's a great question. And, for me, in the classroom, whether face to face or online, the highlight of it for me was not grading or anything like that. And I'm sure this is not unique. Nobody loves grading, but being with the students and learning about them, learning from them. And really in my own classes, I really worked hard to get participation out of my students. Not just the people raising their hand in the front row or whatever, but as many as I could, and as many as wanted to participate. And in a way, while I thought it was really important for them to process the learning through that, selfishly it was also for me, because I could learn where they were, how were they doing in the class, and I could make adjustments when I understood what they were getting and what they weren't getting. So, that faculty presence and using it in the right way, I just think is something, it's a skill that we all have to, continue to talk about and evolve our own practice, teaching practice.
100%. I completely agree.
Shall we?
Yeah.
So we just wanted to sort of set the foundation of sort of the way that we're looking at this. We're looking at the community of inquiry model here. And this Venn diagram sort of represents, that's the word, the various pieces of that puzzle and what's important for learning. And so the obvious ones are the teaching presence, the one-to-many, the sage on the stage, the guide who's telling students what's important and focusing their learning on those elements and sharing information as well. And then there's that cognitive presence where students are reading or doing assignments and reflecting on the work on their own, mostly, to sort of think about it and learn about it. And then there's the social presence. The social presence, I don't know that everyone thinks that this is an important piece of the puzzle, but it really is. It's the piece that allows students to learn from each other, to share perspectives, to bring relevance into what they're learning, what's happening in the real world or what's happened in their own lives, and to share that with each other to sort of really further the process of learning. And if we can go to the next slide, Natalie. Well done. I think it's fair to say that social presence is often assumed or maybe even just ignored. But let's talk about the assumption of social presence. In an online class, that assignment, that prompted assignment that the instructor gives, post once, comment twice, is meant to be that sort of social interaction. But all students are really writing to the instructor there. That's who they're trying to impress. And the commenting that goes on with it is really pro forma and checking the box. I agree, well said. It's not really creating that total sort of ability to create an organic discussion. And it certainly doesn't allow any agency from students to determine what they're going to be looking at or what's important to them. And in a face-to-face class, we think we're all in the same room. It must be a social presence. And certainly it is social. But again, we're primarily going through that lens of the instructor, the viewpoint from the instructor controlling the conversation. Plus the time is so limited, not everybody gets the opportunity to really engage in that. And oftentimes those people in the front row and the back row, even if they're equally engaged, they may not have the opportunity to really share perspectives. So that social presence, we think, is really important in building a big learning community, a strong learning community that encourages that is a piece of the puzzle that is often neglected. Anyone want to add anything onto that? Natalie?
Mm-hmm. I just think there's really great points brought up right now in our chat of social emotional intelligence, or SEL, is crucial for students, and the idea of challenging assumptions in an online space, that there has to be a medium by which that can happen, because of course we're still bringing ourselves to the table. We're still carrying emotion behind what we're saying, what we're typing. So I think it's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have a social presence. We have a social presence here in this webinar. We have a social presence in our social media, and certainly in face-to-face or in other dynamics. I have a social presence in my text chat with my friends and family. And it's just really, it's just something for us to think about, the importance of that social presence in the educational experience. And to the point in the chat about challenging assumptions, the great thing about experimentation and trying all these fun new tools out is to really open up some opportunities to challenge those assumptions and see how educational experiences are evolving. Really fantastic. Bob, shall we proceed? Yeah. Okay. All right.
So this next slide, I'm pretty sure you're all probably capable of reading. I'm hoping. But basically, the point here is that when we're in a community, whether it's an instructor-led community or a community of any kind, everyone in there is influencing each other in some way, in choosing how they participate, and ultimately impacting the learning of everybody else in there. And that's one of the benefits of really bringing out that agency, because we want to have the perspective of some of those students who might not normally have been able to communicate in the past one way or the other. And it just, I think we're talking about faculty presence, but that doesn't mean, and I think somebody in the chat may have sort of alluded to this, it doesn't mean teacher presence, it's more teaching presence. It's the ability to sort of be there. And certainly there are pieces of the puzzle where you're leading, but there are other pieces where you can be a participant and encourage your students to do a lot of that on their own, and to have them shape their own learning and each other's. I'm just going to keep saying
that was well said. No, I think that was great.
All right. Let's, shall we move on?
Yeah, absolutely. So a prompt for you all. And just an FYI, there was a comment in the chat, we're starting with some of the philosophical underpinnings in our thoughts here, and really want to generate an understanding of where students are today and faculty are today, but we will be getting into some specifics later in the presentation of the how all this is done and our recommendations there. So I appreciate everyone, and I love the chat comments. I'd really love to hear from you all about who are your students today, what do they need? I'd love to hear what you're learning about students, and what might be important to them. By the way, you can send your comments to everyone, I think. I know we can see them. Charles, I see your note about students don't want to participate, and how they're not engaging. And that is part of the hurdle about students are very focused in their drive for their achieving, and they may not understand the value and working towards that. That's great. Who else?
Let's see what else we got.
Yeah, love that you're sharing with everyone. Students might think things are busy work, and so focus on why it's important. That's great.
Yeah, setting expectations. When we're in Yellowdig, we talk a lot about instructors setting expectations, not only for what they're expecting from the students, but explaining with regard to Yellowdig the purpose of having that kind of a community, and also what that instructor role is going to be in there. and sharing that presence is a vital piece of it.
Yeah. I just saw some amazing comments from Helen and Mary about how complicated students' lives are, and how important it is to kind of understand that being a student is one component of their complicated lives and various things that they have going on around them. That's great. Thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, I think that's what's so wonderful about Yellowdig when we get into that aspect is we are living very complex lives, and being able to bring that part of that relevancy into your course, or into at least something just opened up so students can share and have that safe space. I kind of feel, if I were to answer this, I think, after coming through 2020, now students are really looking for how to find that balanced sense of community and even relevancy.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing some great additional points in the chat here as well about students, kind of their emotional state after the last 18 months, and how we can support their confidence, how we can support their motivation, how they might be shy, how they might also be learning a new language and needing opportunities to engage in a variety of different ways.
Natalie, when you mentioned that, and obviously it was the comment that mentioned it, I'll give credit where the credit is due. That's sort of what attracted me to online education in the first place, was the idea that students could bubble up. They would be in a situation where they had those students in a classroom who never speak because they want to think more about what they're going to say before they say it. They have that opportunity in an online environment to do that. Or the people who just are stuck behind the people who are always raising their hand, they have the opportunity to emerge. So that was what really attracted me to online learning in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the shifts that I've seen in students, and really understanding who students are today in so many different contexts, and that kind of idea of traditional does not exist anymore. I kind of want to strike that from our language. But students are, they're working learners. They've got jobs either part-time or full-time, or they have obligations that are also competing. They might be caretakers. I'm seeing that more and more, not just that they might have children, but they might have a spouse or a family member, or even a friend that they're supporting in some way and caring for one another, which actually I love that beautiful sense of community, but it's a lot of, just taxes their time and might stretch their priorities. And looking at students, we're all much more informed consumers. I know I am, and that can be consumer for the institution that I'm going to, but also kind of my expectations around what my experience should be. And a lot of our students are also very focused on their career outcomes, and understanding how connecting with each other is really driving that social capital, and those connections that are lifelong. They're not just in one, in a course, and I responded a couple of times to this person or that person, but that you're really able to create these relationships that are ongoing through authentic communication and community. I love all these great things in the chat. This is wonderful. I'll be following up with many of you. I know we'll be doing that. All right. So wanted to just also mention the importance of for student engagement and ideas that we have around ensuring that we have very social, gameful experience, students feel inspired, and that they are able to connect, that it's scalable. I mean, we hear all the time, faculty are pressed for time, just as other members of the academic community, including students, are pressed for time. So how can we make those engagements scalable and very supportive? And then ensuring that, focused on outcomes, and that's being the student success in the course, student retention across their program, that they're more engaged in their learning experience, so they have that deeper academic experience, and that their satisfaction increases. It's really remarkable too to see, as I mentioned, the social capital that is built as students are connecting, and it's one of the things that it's wonderful to see how people are truly connecting, knowing that it's just a statistic about that 80% of jobs are found through personal and professional networks. And so it's really important in any environment that we're connecting with each other and building those relationships.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. It's not funny, but it's some of our programs, especially at the grad level. One of the benefits of the learning communities that we're helping to create is that these adult learners, these professionals, are connecting with each other, not only over the learning, but also, you know, business type connections or professional connections that they can take away from what they've been doing.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about faculty. And we have a couple of questions. You all are doing a great job chatting, which I just love the engagement. So feel free to answer both or either or one. But for faculty, how are you showing up for your students? And then since 2020, how has your approach in student engagement evolved? And if you're not a faculty member, then what you're seeing from other colleagues, or how you might be in your role showing up for students.
I mean, clearly 2020 changed the way many people had ever interacted before, and because, you know, adapt or die, I guess, is sort of the thought there. You gotta do what you can. Yeah, this chat is great. I'm hoping we can save that.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I'm seeing some things coming in.
Empathy. Yes.
Flexibility. Oh my gosh, fun. That's great, Keith.
I really like that, Carl. Listening for pains, wounds, and angst.
Yeah, that's definitely social emotional learning and perspective taking. That's great.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't like pain, wounds, and angst. I like Carl's comment.
Yeah, being there to help students even outside the course. Thank you for doing that.
And, you know, by being here in this webinar, not every teacher cares all that much about their students. Let's be honest. I mean, so for some people, teaching is an afterthought. It's something that they do because they have to, not because it's their passion. They're engaged in research, which of course is great. But for the people here in this webinar, clearly you have an interest in being there for your students. So I think that's something you should applaud yourself for.
Yeah, for sure. I want to play the other card because, you know, having been through teaching in grad school teaching and then online teaching, it's tough. It's hard. There are days when you're like, I'm not going to look at the chat right now. Let them do their own thing. Being engaged all the time as an instructor with your students is a role in itself of designing what's going to go in the plan of action, what's going to go in the curriculum. So bringing it back to how we show up to our students really starts with evaluating, I think, kind of like where we are at with ourselves, right? To put it on a social emotional level. So I'm really glad if any of your responses say, showing up for my students, I got to start figuring out where I am first, right? That's the first piece. So
providing encouragement, believe in students, acknowledgement is a key factor in that. Shall we move on to, here's a couple of quotes.
Yeah. Bob, I think you were going to talk a bit about this cases, and then also how there's kind of the symbiotic relationship between students and teachers. And
so these quotes are related to an example at University of Michigan School of Public Health, where they ran a simulation based public health crisis, opioid crisis, and the students in Yellowdig all took roles of, and I don't know the names of the roles, but they're a Dr. Fauci-like person or the governor, and they participated in this Yellowdig community, not as themselves, but as those roles. And the instructor presence here, the faculty presence here really was devising this, figuring out how can I get my students to see this from a particular perspective, a different perspective than they would otherwise. And the students really felt like they were a part of this, but they also directed their own, they acted as characters in this scenario. and really got a lot out of it. You can see the quotes, people loved it.
Yeah.
Let's
That sounds fun. That sounds like a game.
I think you can learn more about that in our ebook, which I believe we have linked at the end.
Yeah.
What is it, like Clue?
Huh.
Oh, okay.
So faculty presence in communities. You all are going to have great ideas for this as well. And of course, our experience is best leveraged from Yellowdig itself. And so I thought we would share maybe just a few things related to that. And as I sort of mentioned before, one of the most important things I think that an instructor can do is set expectations for students at the outset of what they're starting. That, let them know, what this community is about. I mean, your class is a community. What is the purpose of it? And the purpose of this community is to learn from each other, to share our relevant personal experiences, to reflect on what's happening in the real world as it relates to the course content, right? And then, in Yellowdig, we encourage instructors to look at the community as being instructor modeled rather than instructor led. In other words, they're a citizen of the community as the instructors are, and they can share their passion for the subject matter, which really goes a long way with students. When students know you're interested in what you're doing, it makes a big difference. I had this one professor once in the basement of a building with no windows, unventilated. He smoked a pipe and read word for word from the textbook while the pipe was in his mouth. That guy did not motivate me at all. And I was not interested in that subject matter, even if I had gone into it with it. So I think it's really important. That was a true story. So I think it's really important to do that. And the other piece of the puzzle, and I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm suddenly saying piece of the puzzle all the time, but the other thing
You wanted to say it again.
is that students want to know you're there, to have that instructor presence, to know that what you're doing, somebody said in the chat before, that it isn't busy work, that there's a purpose behind it, that they're, if they do it, they're going to learn from doing that. And then obviously sharing expectations as far around for what type of conversations you're going to have. Somebody in the chat mentioned, that sometimes students are off topic, or they write things that are not exceedingly well thought of or anything like that. And that's another area where an instructor can sort of model the kinds of behavior they want to see in the community. And in Yellowdig, one of the ways to sort of do that is through the use of what we call accolades, the badges that have point values that shall tell students, what, this is something that if you want to get more points, you should emulate. You'll create better conversations. I mean, that's our point of view. The student point of view is, hey, I'm getting a reward and I see someone else got a reward, so I'm going to adjust to what I'm doing to get that reward. And that can go a long way towards creating, whether it's in Yellowdig or somewhere else, sort of surfacing that kind of a thing and creating the kinds of conversations that you want students to have. And if I may, just one other little piece before I share it up, is that unfortunately, instructor presence doesn't necessarily mean instructor domination. When the instructor insinuates himself into a student conversation, the result is often that conversation then turns strictly to the instructor, right? I don't care what anyone else was saying. I want to get back to what the instructor was saying. That's where I'm going. And so something like this badging, these accolades, allow an instructor to show that they're present, to show the kinds of behavior that they want to see, to show what's important without disrupting the conversation that students are having. Natalie?
Yeah, Bob, I think those are such amazing points. I think about the various ways that faculty show up and show presence, and that's in looking at all these different variety of ways, from posting and polling and sharing or commenting and reactions and the awards, that really you see the type of engagement, both the time investment, but also kind of the voice being different. And so being that community citizen. If you want your students to be active, be active as well. And remember, we still live in a world where those, reactions, those thumbs ups or those smiley faces or, the fun emojis, like really, they make us feel good. And having that, simply having a faculty member give that thumbs up in a conversation or provide an accolade that really highlights the importance of a post by a student is affirming without inserting a voice into the conversation. So when I'm thinking about the wide variety of ways that faculty can show up and be present in these communities, it's just the sky's the limit in all of these different social presence ideas. And I made a note about like creating these unique accolades. I think that's where you can let your personality shine as well, emphasizing that importance of like, here's critical thinking, but also just like, this is a great connection between two topics, or it's an awesome application, or perhaps it's a fun interlude or something like that. But however you want to really let your personality and the personality of the course shine through those accolades can be really wonderful. I love also the importance of connecting people and connecting ideas. The use of, we're really used to in many of our social channels of doing the at mention. So at mentioning another participant in the community allows these people to know that they're connected or that they have ideas to share with one another. And that can be a powerful part of the response. So if you're a faculty member and you're looking for a great way of helping support students in their learning, remember that those interconnections are highly valuable and they may not see them. So giving them those prompts of responding to someone and recommending or sharing that their idea was similar to someone else's and that they're exploring that topic together is just a wonderful way of helping people see their connections and build that critical, the critical thinking there. There's also the ideas shared and how people are approaching maybe different current events that are shared and how those are interconnected or might be relevant to one another. And Bob, you had an amazing story about how the network graph can be used to really limit isolation. I know we talk about like the idea of being able to tell if students are isolated so that you can reach out to them to get them re-engaged, but there's also this emotional component to it as well. And so I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, so some of you may know there is a global pandemic that was going on, and last year during the pandemic, one of the instructors using Yellowdig shared a story that what you're looking at there on the right side of the screen is the Yellowdig network graph that shows how students are connected, what the strength of those connections are, who they're connected with, and as you can see up at the top right, there are some what we call outlier students who haven't really participated in that community. And this instructor went into the network graph just to take a look around and saw that one student was an outlier student. This was, several weeks into the course, and she wondered why that student wasn't engaging. So she reached out to that student, and it turned out that this particular student, and I think this was a graduate class, was extremely depressed and felt extremely isolated, hadn't really, because of the lockdown, hadn't seen or been communicating with anybody else. And her communication with this student really made a huge difference, brought the student back into the learning community. And from what I understand, the student thrived from there on out. And I'm not going to say that this saved that student's life or anything like that, but it absolutely made a difference in that student's life. Just knowing that we're there.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Natalie, you also had some great examples of, and I think it was also from your teaching experience, but just how there's a cycle of student engagement and then incorporating that into teaching practice. And I wonder if you would share about
that. Absolutely. I think teaching science, part of one of our next generation science standards is to build relevancy into our students' daily contextual lives. So, I wouldn't touch on the great coral reef, barrier reef out, on the coast when we live in California and we're experiencing droughts. So we'd bring in different samples or pictures or ideas of how it's shown up in our daily lives. And students would bring in pictures of how they've, decided to conserve water at home or started cooking in different ways or stopped purchasing certain types of food and to just be more eco-friendly. And I think anytime that you can bring that sort of relevancy into your course. And I love the many communities because I'm in our communities daily. I work with our pilot program here. And so I get to read and see the different ways that students will just start the conversations and they'll start polling each other, sometimes modeling off of the instructor doing that. But I think once they get excited about something related to your course, they'll start driving these conversations week to week. As seen on the next slide, I'm kind of looking at that one here on my other screen. Engagement in Yellowdig community. I know we talked a little bit about posting and commenting, awarding accolades, and at mentioning. You can see that your role as a community citizen really takes life throughout your weeks across your course on the right side. Whereas the left side is primarily your instructors are starting off all of the discussions because it is based on a certain week, right? I think someone mentioned Sultan on the stage, avoiding that. I had never heard that before, so I was laughing, and that's how you could possibly see or interpret the left side. And of course, you have probably me, Bob, and Natalie Moret right here as the go-getters in green, starting off those conversations, but waiting for everybody else to chime in. So with the Yellowdig community, as we've talked about the different ways you can help support engagement, you actually become that, who mentioned it? Pontiff.
The pontiff on the
Never heard these.
the pulpit, which I love. That's great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then some weeks you don't know who started off. Yeah, student starter. But of course, we have a huge team behind you, supporting you in ways that you can do that, and we'll definitely coach you through it or learn from you, because we are definitely learning from our own community of Yellowdig instructors.
Before we head off of this slide, one of the things I'd like to point out is that in Yellowdig, in a true learning community, these conversations can ebb and flow, can reemerge when they become important, when there's something in the real world that's happening related to the course material. I say this, if you've ever been in a meeting with me, I say it way too much. My own course is American Government. Week 2, we talk about the Electoral College. If there's something really happening where the Electoral College is engaging and meeting, do I want my students reflecting on it? My answer is absolutely. And that's something I just wanted to harp on a little bit more. Harp isn't the right word, but basically the idea that I can learn. I know I said this earlier, but I can learn from my students. I can learn about the world and things that I might not have known. But beyond that, I can learn to see where they are and adjust my teaching if I know what kinds of conversations around the course material they're having. And another indicator of that is on week 4 there, you'll see that there's a little question mark next to a student. And that means that a student is asking questions. What a powerful learning experience, not only to feel comfortable asking questions, but to try to answer questions for your peers. Hopefully saving, again, that instructor workload to some teeny degree to have students answer each other's questions. But here again, when you let students answer each other's questions, it's a great learning tool, because the students have to understand the question, they have to know the answer, and then they have to figure out a way to communicate that answer effectively to their peers. But there is still an important thing for the instructor, because students want to know what is the answer that the instructor wants. If 15 students all answer the question, that's great, but they still want to know which one is the instructor say is the right one. And in Yellowdig, using those little accolades, little plug, is one way that you can do that without typing a word. You can just put an accolade on the best answer, and they know that that's the right answer. So, but basically, this is a learning community that thrives on student agency and guidance and setting expectations by the instructor.
Thanks so much. There's a couple of things that's kind of coming up for me that I wanted to, and I just wanted to share that, and Bob, I think you hit upon it with so many students like trying to answer, that's kind of a vulnerable point of a student asking a question to the whole group and then the students trying to answer. And they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to have perfect critical thinking. They're not going to have a perfect response, or they may have a perfect response. But I think that you can use some of these tools to allow students to really exercise their learning in a way that addresses some of the perfectionism that we have, that anytime I raise my hand or ask my question, that I have to be super perfect, and that can be a barrier for engagement. And so using community in a way that allows people to share things, not that they're not thought out, but that they can be a little bit less well-formed, to get feedback and ensure that there's kind of this cycle of learning and improvement and putting things out there and gaining feedback and moving on. I think that that's part of this overall growth approach, and important for us to realize how we can do that in these types of communities. It also helps me recognize kind of two things that I think are important, no matter the technology that we have or anything, any structures that we have. Really, what our mindsets matter in our engagement with students. And there's two things. Natalie mentioned the work of Carol Dweck, and there's been some great research, and I think we've got some good research sessions ahead of us where we can explore this, but just the importance of a growth mindset and how faculty are approaching students and understanding their ability to, their skills are malleable and how that impacts their success. And then the second thing being that, again, that we're citizens together in this community, that we're learning from one another. And certainly as faculty, we have knowledge about a subject or domain, but we don't have the same life experience as others. And so how that applies in those life contexts is really interesting. So leveraging those amazing, adult learning theory approaches that can really create a collaborative social environment for everyone. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question. First of all, to somewhat based on what you're saying, but also seeing a few different things in the chat related to, the instructor being a part of the community and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering if you can throw in the chat, what do you have students call you? I had students call me Bob. And I started doing that because I hated trying to get them to pronounce my last name correctly. But I really found that to be, for me anyway, to sort of lower the barriers for communication with them. And I'm just curious, what does everyone think? That includes the Natalies.
I was Miss Ramos.
Well, you were with younger kids for.
I was with the littles, so
yeah.
If they called me by my first name, it was a different discussion we had. No, it's okay.
Call me Helen, and that's your name. Okay, that's cool.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Everybody has a different approach here. Yeah. And ensuring that we also use their names as well. And there's nothing like hearing your own name.
Absolutely. When it's manageable, making the effort to know the student's name and to communicate with that name is just really important. So I have a funny story about that. I injured myself making guacamole, and the people at Yellowdig will hear this story more in full. Anyway, I had to go ultimately in an ambulance.
I've never heard this.
Yeah, no, I haven't. Yeah, anyway. And in the ambulance, one of the EMTs was a former student of mine. And I really tried hard to learn each student's name. And this student's name was Elizabeth. That was her given name, and that was name in the roster. And I had been calling her Liz all semester because I swear that was her name. And in the ambulance, I said, "Hi, Liz," and she said, "Well, I go by Beth." And I'm like, "Oh man, she's going to let me bleed out." But
they saved my life, but
but instead, I remembered also she got an A, so she offered to give me more morphine, but I didn't take it. But anyway, yeah. So I think that's really an important part of the process is getting to let your students know that you see them as human beings.
Yeah, and there's definitely a couple chat pieces here about how we introduce our students to Yellowdig. How do we help them understand it's different than a discussion board? It's not like posting in Canvas or Blackboard or D2L. And we're happy to work with you. We have multiple office hour sessions. We can dig a little deeper into exploring ways you've done in the past and how you can expand on it and modify it in Yellowdig. But, I'd say in general, takeaway, leaving with Yellowdig or not from here, I think the biggest thing is you're human and show up as a real person with life outside courses and make things a little more relevant. Ask your students. I think we can learn a lot from our community of learners.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just springboard off of that and like try all kinds of new things and show up in a variety of different ways. And I think that's part of the possibilities here. Bob, any last thoughts before we share the last slide? I'm just going to say, here's our contact information. Reach out to us.
Yes.
I mean, I think it was a really great session. I can't wait to go into further depth and read all the comments in the chat. I didn't get to read all of them while we were talking, but the ones I saw looked really insightful and really interesting. But I also just want to reiterate, please reach out to us. If you want to consult on your individual course, please shoot me an email, bob@yellowdig.com. And our office hour sessions, just to clarify a little bit, are to allow you to ask questions about Yellowdig pedagogy or technology, and we'll make sure that we answer them for you. All right.
Thank you. So if you're interested in our ebook, Made for Humans, hot off the presses, or any of our fall semester kickoff sessions, the information is here. If you're currently trying out or using the Yellowdig Engage platform and would like to work together on a case study, I know that we would love to do that and would love to highlight your success and your learnings in your communities. Always fun to see how students are engaging and how faculty are engaging in these communities. Natalie and Bob, thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to share before we head out?
Just have a great semester, everybody.
Yeah, that's pretty. I got to hear about that guacamole story, though.
Well, I'll tell it at a happy hour.
I think we'll save that after the recording.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I love all the comments. Thank you for your engagement. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.